Okay, it looks like we're approaching 2:15, which is when we're gonna start our next session. So I hope everyone had a chance to stretch, get a snack, take care of yourself a little bit. I know it's been a really long but valuable time so far. Yep, Kim, I'm good. Let's introduce ourselves. So today I will be presenting with Dr. Kim Ballard. Kim is an instructional designer in CCAP's Academic Technology and Design. And my name is Megan Seltz, and I am an academic advisor in CCAPs for about the past 15 or so years. I primarily work with construction management students, but I have worked with a handful of other majors too over the years. So Kim is a bit under the weather today. I will be doing most of the speaking, but she will be assisting us with the slides and perhaps a few words at the end if she's feeling up to it. So we really want to thank everyone for coming today. This has been such a great experiment because you all are getting to feel what it feels like to be a student in a 3-hour class or a 4-hour class, and figuring out, what works to help us stay engaged and maybe what doesn't work so well and what you might do differently. So that's what we really want this time today to be, is to think about the student experience and how you can use some of these tools and strategies in your own class to keep students alert, engaged, interested, high energy, all of those things that we want. All right. Today's session is going to work best if you all could be logged into your umn.edu Gmail accounts. We are going to do a bit of doc sharing in a little bit, and if you're in a work account or another account, it may not work so well. It'll kick you out. And one other tip is that if you do feel comfortable having your cameras on, I do encourage it with my students. Research has shown that it helps with engagement. That said, I recognize that not everyone has amazing internet or is, maybe feeling under the weather. And if the camera on doesn't work great for you today, that's okay. I'll respect that as well. But I do recommend that you encourage your students to keep their cameras on if they can. It does help put a face to a name. All right, yeah, so we can launch our first poll. And we'll give you a few minutes here, or a minute or so, to answer this. Take the temperature of the room and see where we are. Okay. Should we share our results? All right, so we have a little bit of experience. Well, maybe half of us have taught with Zoom, which is great. It may have been a full semester. It may have been a class here or there. And luckily, Zoom is always improving its features, so that's great. And then the other question is, are you nervous about teaching with Zoom? And I sense a fair level of confidence here. Over half of us feel like, all right, we got this. We can figure out how to do it. And if you are a little bit nervous, it's good. It keeps you on your toes, gives you a chance to kind of think about how we want that to be. So we can close the poll, please. Maybe I need to do that on my own end. Okay, thanks. And one thing I wanted to preface this with is, in the spirit of what Steph shared, they had a lot of great information to share with us. And I do encourage comments, questions, go in the chat, type in a question either to myself or to the other folks in the group, because we have a room here full of expert teachers, and we're just going to work on ways to translate those teaching skills into Zoom. So be an interactive group. I really appreciate that. That takes the pressure off of me to have to do all of the talking. And if I don't, call on you, I don't see your hand up or something, just let me know. All right, so if we could go to the next slide, please. We're doing a little tag team work here. All right. So from room to Zoom, I just want to real briefly tell you my story. So as I said, I'm an academic advisor. I don't teach for CCAPs. I actually teach a course through the Center for Spirituality and Healing, and it is called Living on Purpose. And it is actually taught in this room you see right here, the Mayo Meditation Room, over on the East Bank, which was formerly a chapel. So that is the kind of room that has a special vibe. It's not a traditional classroom. We sit in a circle exactly like that. We have cushions, people lay on yoga mats. I mean, it's a chance. We do a lot of deep self-reflection. And as part of that, we really appreciate how the room sets the vibe. So when we realized, my co-teacher and I, that we would be going on Zoom this semester, we really had to do some thinking about how we were going to make a very experiential, lots of group work, type of class work in a Zoom environment. And so we typically have 4-hour classes, which kind of feels a bit like today, right? 4 hours in front of the computer can be exhausting, boring, it's hard to stay engaged. We all can have a lot of big feelings around that. So we were working on some ways to make that be fun and keep people's interest. And I'm going to go over some of the tools that we used and some of the tips that I've gleaned from one semester of teaching. And I know a lot of us in CCAPs also have long evening classes, so I imagine y'all can relate to that a little bit. Okay. So how can we build community and relationships within the Zoom environment? For students, and some of the other advisors in the room, I thought I saw Tony, Teresa, AJ, Liz, can attest that this semester online has been really hard on a lot of our students. And they say, this is my college experience. It might be their senior year, it might be their freshman year, but it is definitely not anything like they had hoped or planned. Even those that like the convenience of distance learning, online classes, miss the relationship building. So one of the things I'm going to do is encourage you all to think of ways to give them time to connect with their peers so that they can have not only that peer learning, but build those relationships, maybe even friendships. So as we've been using all day as part of this training, we have the chat feature, and it can be used for a lot more than simply questions. Of course, that's a great feature as well. But one example from the class that I taught is at the end of the semester, we have students create this visual artistic purpose map, and they share some of the key components of things we've studied over the semester and what they've learned. So they're able to use markers and glitter or whatever they want to kind of share that, and they would hold it up. And we had students sharing deeply personal stories about coming out to their parents as queer, sexual assault, difficult trauma that had happened to them, or not even trauma, but just difficult situations. And we had a few students tear up and kind of, not only get nervous, but get really emotional about it. And quite spontaneously throughout the course of the class, the other students would chime in with the chat and say, keep going, this is really important. You're so brave for sharing this story. And they could really communicate with each other about what they were presenting. And that also gave the presenter the sense of like, okay, this isn't awkward, I'm not oversharing here, to have that feedback. So in the form of the chat, in the form of reactions, there was that sense of community that was built. They also shared social media handles and all started following each other on different platforms and were able to build relationships that way. I fully recognize that not every class is going to have that kind of bonding, but don't preclude it. I think it can happen, even if it's just that affinity of, hey, we're all in the same major, we're all studying the same topic. This is their student experience. So do what you can to facilitate that. I also want to acknowledge that when the chat is going a lot, it can be a bit distracting as the instructor. And I want you to give yourselves permission to not have to try to answer every question live and in real time. And you can tell your students, hey, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to follow up as I can. But this is just a nonverbal form of live communication that doesn't involve interrupting the speaker, that doesn't involve, raising your hand. It's just like instant feedback. So the chat is actually a really amazing tool. And I would say it's my favorite tool in Zoom. So I just wanted to share those points. So now if everyone could log into the chat, use the chat, click the little chat button, and I want you to share one word with the group about CCAP's Faculty Development Day so far. A word about how you're feeling, a word about what you've learned. Yeah. Good. Good. And I know some of us at the university, we're pretty used to Zoom. Others working in corporate jobs or other institutions don't use it very much. It's new. So we all have different levels of familiarity with it. But there you go. We've had a full day to practice. So this is great. Good. Yep. Max says it's calming. That's good to hear, right? We all want to be familiar with it. Okay, Kim, if you're ready to go to the next slide. And we can be funny, right? That's a great use of it as well. Okay, another excellent thing is collaboration. So when you're working with your class and you're thinking of ways to structure assignments or an activity, maybe you were going to write it on the whiteboard, or every class is different, think of how you would use it. Now students can more easily collaborate live in documents together. They can work on projects, presentations, spreadsheet, Google Docs, and you can share those easily in the links or in the chat. So I'm going to share a link with you all to a Google Doc. Hopefully we have the right one here. And you can click on that, and it's going to take us all to a doc called CCAP's Teaching Tips. And as a room of experts here, I'd like you all to add 1 or 2 teaching tips that you want to share with your colleagues. And we can all kind of learn from each other. Oh, I like that, Peter. The Socratic method, right? And also sometimes what I just call popcorn, which is like, I'm calling on you now, because when you have a room of little faces and you wait for someone to speak up, it can be quite awkward. But if they feel called on, and then you encourage that student to popcorn to another student, call on the next student, gives them permission to speak, and they feel a little bit less nervous about jumping in. So actively participate with the students, encourage participation. Yep. It's always a little bit awkward as the instructor when kind of like right now, nobody's talking besides me. I feel a little bit like a bad stand-up comedian that's kind of bombing on stage, and feedback is helpful for everyone. So active audience is good. Don't hold students to having their cameras on. That's fair. I mean, it can be an issue of access and equality. could be the device. It could just be someone feeling like they don't want to be on camera. And I would never put participation points or, you know, based on camera, but it's just kind of helpful if they can.
This is John.
I forgot to mention my other qualification, which is that I have 2 children in distance learning doing Zoom. So I do a lot of hovering and helping and observing them in their classes. And there's some awkward moments when you get a bunch of 7th graders in a breakout room or on Zoom saying absolutely nothing. Okay.
Can I offer an
You all
observation?
can keep adding to that list, and I will share the link with you after. And maybe there's some tips on there that you want to take forward and use in your classroom. Oh, thank you, Peter. Look at that, great feedback. Okay, so let's move on to our next slide. Yeah, there we go, breakout rooms. I'm pretty sure everyone's been in a breakout room. Oh, someone was going to make a comment. Speak up.
Can you hear me?
John, yeah.
Oh, great. So I just noticed, you notice how everybody was walking on each other in that document? The editors were all walking on each other's cursor in the document. I have these documents that I use for the same purpose and create buckets in them and tell them to work in their bucket, and then it will sort of, you know, appear and have one person for the little group, because I have those groups that go in. I just say go in your groups. I found the breakout room mechanism like makes them even quieter and they can go off topic. If we stay together and we do something like this, but the document you give them to work in is pre-constructed by you to get the groups working in an area in it, like a table. I say, group A, you work in this box, then group B in the second box, so forth. Then they like see each other writing without confusing each other's writing. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And so it's a little more graceful way of doing it, saying, here's a blank page, go at it, 12, 14.
That is an excellent tip. And that's sort of like a trial by error thing, right? I'm sure you learned the hard way that
Week one.
it needs to be more organized when you're sharing a doc. Barbara, did you have a comment?
Megan, I was just going to ask, I find it interesting, the comment about, you know, not asking students to turn on their video. We actually did ask students to turn on their video. It just felt a lot more participatory that we could see people and try to bring people together around an experience in our classes. You know, in the beginning, everyone wanted to have the camera off, and, you know, whether it's just a perception that they're more disengaged. It's not always a requirement, but it's something we ask, please turn on your camera. Once in a while, somebody says, well, you know, my internet service is slow, it's not working, and we always understand, but we actually want people to have the video on. So I just wonder about that. I mean, now, you know, we try not to be too pushy, but it's sort of an expectation. What do you think about that?
I know that the research shows that when students have their camera on, they're more engaged. So I do tend to side with that, wanting to have cameras on. I'm wondering if whoever wrote the comment about not having the camera on, if they could explain where they're coming from on that.
Sure. This has been Marcy. I'll even turn my camera on. There are issues around equity and what each student has as sort of place where they can be in space to be into the Zoom space with you. And so there are issues about, like, am I sitting in a closet because this is the only place that I can be in this apartment that I'm living in and not be bothered by 3 other kids that are also in this space? Am I self-conscious about, I don't want you seeing into this room and into my private area, into my private life of who I am? And there's just different issues of equity that come into that, of like, what are you holding people accountable to? What standard of access that they have?
Right.
But also add, some people are concerned. I know my students have said sometimes they're concerned about security issues, about some of these stories that go back about people being able to spy in through their camera into what's happening, you know, to the students. So I know they have concerns there too. So it's true.
Part of that's an education issue, though. I mean, I understand the points being talked about, but I try to make my Zoom sessions as close to a classroom experience as possible. And I can see my students when we're in a classroom. I want to see my students when we're in a Zoom session. I'm not going to make them do it, but I'm going to strongly encourage it, even to the point of rewarding it in terms of points. I get it on the accessibility thing, but I also know these students are the same ones on WhatsApp and FaceTime making video calls to their parents and their friends right after class. And somehow they seem to have bandwidth for that. So it's something that I won't let my strong personal beliefs influence my teaching to past a certain extent. But I think in many ways we're kind of played by our students too. And I try to push that. It's too easy to turn a camera off. Like even I do for video conferences at work, walk out of the room, grab a sandwich, go wander around, do some errands, come back and turn my video feed back on. And everybody else thinks I've been there the whole time. No. Even when I was in a classroom, you know how many Facebook updates were going out? But, you know, because I can't see what's on their laptop. I think in some ways it's an honesty contract with students. Keep your camera on, so I can at least tell you're still participating in my class, because I have no other way of doing it. Unless there is some other way, I would welcome that. But there's a social contract here, and I think the students need to own up to part of that. And having a video feed on is a real easy way to do that.
Yeah, so you know, we have some differing viewpoints, and I've heard both viewpoints before, and I can kind of, you know, see both sides of it. You know, and I wonder if this is something that as a college, we might have a position on for our instructors to kind of take that off of their plate. Yeah, I don't have a solid answer for y'all today, but it's something to think about, right?
It's interesting, our college and other colleges at the university, you know, I don't even have to name, but one of my kids is a junior at the University of Minnesota in a different college, and it's required that he has his video on, that he has stable internet as he's participating in his classes and his breakouts with his teams, with his instructors. So it's actual requirements. It's what I just heard in terms of having points assigned and losing points if you don't. So I really appreciate the comments being made, and I understand there are sort of issues around it, but it's interesting. And I think if there's a position as a college and what's going on across the university, and the consistency of what expectations are for students.
Well, maybe we can talk to Tony Scott about that and see if he wants to issue a policy on that. But it's good to hear where y'all are coming from.
Yeah, can I quickly say something?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think I will encourage my students to turn on their video, because of if I need to be able to monitor whether they are engaged. And what I have been practicing over the month is I will ask them to change their name, like they can put their nickname instead of their real names. And some of them have been doing that, and they are comfortable using their nickname instead of you know, the real names.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that will go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Your alias, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And you know, we have a slide on that. That the nice thing about Zoom is you can see people's preferred name. You can see their pronouns. If their picture's up or the video, you can actually put a face to the name. Sometimes in class, that's a little bit harder, especially if they sit in the back and are a little bit quiet. So there are some benefits to that. So good discussion. I appreciate that.
Yeah, let me just add my little 2 cents. We are in a different environment. Our students didn't want this. They didn't want to be learning from home. And so as much as we can be accommodating to them, we should be, as instructors, as faculty. And I know we want to see their faces, because it does show that they are involved in class. But if you have someone who has any type of struggle with who they are as a person, any type of issues that like, I don't want to be seen this way, then so if we can find ways to accommodate them, maybe it's talking to them in person, asking them questions directly, so that you can see that they're engaged in the course, and asking them to put in the chat as ways to know that they're engaged, that so that we don't require to see their face, that we have to see their face. But I'm just looking at it on the side of a student and speaking as a former or still somewhat current academic advisor, always advocating on the behalf of my students.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I actually don't think it should be a policy. I think it should be a guideline.
Yeah.
I think we have to be completely reasonable. There's so many circumstances about this. So I really agree with what you're sharing, Tony.
Megan, it's Jeff. I'd like your thoughts on grading participation. Again, it's a lot easier when you're in the classroom, but all the comments that have been made thus far, if you see somebody there and you're taking attendance, and that's a component of the grade is participation. And I also agree with Tony that you can make accommodations for that, and students can let you know that, hey, I'm here, but I'm just not going to turn on my screen for whatever reason. Any thoughts you have on that?
Well, I can just point to an example. In our college, we have an instructional designer that many of you may have worked with, Mark Kaiser. Unfortunately, he just moved on to another position. He was the most active person in Zoom meetings, and he never used his camera. He couldn't. He didn't have good internet. He shared it with a tenant, I believe. But he was there in the chat. He was on top of things. He was sending you messages and emojis, and you never doubted for a second that he was with you. So if you have that, then I would just, hope that the student would show us in other ways beyond video that they're engaged.
Zoom host here. I actually had to come into the office because my internet is horrible. I had a tech guy come out and he told me the reason that Zoom isn't working is because the only internet provided to me is at this certain level. So in a way, it's kind of like there's certain things that are just outside of students' control in terms of whether they have the bandwidth to use Zoom or not. And I think I agree with Tony that students haven't asked for this, and especially for courses that are typically face-to-face or blended, this is something that's like a certain understanding we have to have because of the circumstances. I guess that's my 2 cents I wanted to add to this, because this is a problem that I've had to encounter with technology.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to move on to the next slide just so we can cover everything. But you can continue to chat with each other in the chat. That's what it's for. Breakout rooms, right? We've all been in a breakout room. Show me with a reaction if you've ever set up a breakout room. Thumbs up or any emoji. I'm just curious. I know some folks have been in them but haven't set them up. Okay, no, yeah, that works too. No. Okay. It's not hard, but it is one of those things that you don't know if you did it right until you've got a live audience in front of you and you press go. So it's a little bit, kind of live on the scene. So unfortunately, I can't let you test out how to set up a breakout room, but I did just share a couple of points that there's these 4 little dots down on your main taskbar. You click that and the box above it, it'll say create X number of breakout rooms. You can do that based on how many students you have and how many you want in each group. You can automatically assign the groups and preload that. You can do it, Zoom can automatically assign it. You can do it manually and preload your groups, or you could make a room based on a certain topic and let students choose. And I've actually used all 4 of those methods with students in breakout rooms, and it worked really well. And my experience that I've had with it, so as an instructor, you can pop in, you can also get feedback from students on the breakout rooms. And we had groups in the class, and they were in the same group all semester. So they had these 4 or 5 classmates that they really got to know well in the breakout rooms and perhaps outside. And our thought was, even if they didn't spend every last minute working on the class, the time they spend saying, hey, what's your major? Where do you live? Just kind of getting to know each other is part of creating that community experience in a class and within a major. So even if you feel like maybe they're a little bit more off task in a breakout room, there are benefits and things that perhaps they want to talk about with each other, but not with you present, within a certain range. And I found that to be really successful and on topic and not a cop-out for getting out of work. And frequently what you can do is have them do some work in the breakout room and then come back to the big group and share that. And you have a spokesperson, and then you can kind of get the cumulative knowledge of the classroom and hear the differing opinions, much like we did today with Steph. So breakout rooms are a really great tool, especially if you have a big class. I know Peter has a class of 40 or 50 coming up, and he's thinking of ways to use breakout rooms to by topic and by groups, just to make that a little bit smaller and more intimate. The other thing is, if you're in a group of 50, it's really easy to be quiet. But if you're in a group of 4, you kind of have to speak up. This is you're more accountable because you're in this little group of people, and it's going to be your turn to chime in. So think about breakout rooms. The other thing about them is it can be a little break for you. So while you pop your students into a breakout room for a few minutes, you have a minute to collect your thoughts, to run to the bathroom, to transition to the next thing. So think about that strategically as well. Like, when do you need a minute to yourself to prepare? So that said, we're going to put you all into a breakout room, maybe more as partners or pairs. And I want you to discuss with each other how you could use this in your class. So we'll get you in there. Okay. Anybody want to share any interesting ideas that you may have come up with, or interesting ways that you typically use it in class?
Yeah, I'm going to say the breakout room is very, very essential for me because I teach statistics, and statistics is a course where students actually need to interact, rub minds together, intellectually. So, and then another thing is that not only that I want them to interact, but I want students from diverse background an opportunity to interact together. So I take the breakout through, and what I normally do after breaking them into the, using the breakout room, I normally monitor what they were discussing. And at the end of the day, by the time I mark them to the main section, then somebody is going to represent each group, and they're going to reflect on what they've discussed. So it's fantastic.
Absolutely. Kind of like what we're doing right now, right?
And one question
Exactly.
we had is, what does anybody have a good idea as to what the ideal size for a breakout room is, especially when you have a large class? What's the dynamic number that works?
For my class, okay. For my class, I think the minimum. We have a method of statistics to decide on the sample size, just like the method we use in determining sample size when you want to go out for survey. So, but I'm going to say minimum 4 for statistics. I can only say for statistics. Thank you.
Liz agrees with that for
3 to 5 is usually a good small group size, according to research purposes.
great. In our class, we did groups of 5, but usually some of them ended up being 4, and that worked really well. And then that's 3 or 4 other people in the class that your student met, right? Like potential friends, right? It's like someone that they got to know during this time when they're otherwise stuck at home in a situation that they didn't ask to be in, like Tony said. So it is really important. And in our particular class, the #1 feedback we got was, I came into the semester just trying to get through, and I was so pleased and happy to meet other people, to make friends, to share stories about real life with other people. So it ended up being a very powerful semester. I know everyone's class is different, but it means a lot to the students. Even if they don't know it at first, it will mean a lot. So Kim, I don't know if you can pull up the next slide. I'm gonna just touch on a couple of things. Here we go. We're not going to use the Whiteboard Tool right now, but I want to remind you all that it's there under your share. And then instead of picking share screen, you share a whiteboard. And this is a collaborative artistic tool that you can use to add a little color, to do a little bit of brainstorming. Oops, there we go. So someone just asked, so what's the ideal time to be in a breakout room? I think it depends on what you're doing. I would say if it's a 1 question thing, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. If it's some serious time to work on a project, we did give our students 30 minutes in every class. We had a 3.5-hour class, but 30 minutes to work together. So I don't know if anyone has any statistics on the best amount of time, but that's my experience. No. Okay. So anyway, don't forget about the whiteboard. It can be a fun little thing to use. And this is something you can practice on your own. So after we're done today, you can kind of go in and practice using the different tools and colors and see if there might be a way. You can use text. So sometimes we end class with, say 1 word about how you're feeling now after class, and they'll type it in. This is a great way to be a little bit artsy-fartsy about it. Okay. Next slide, please. And I'm sure you're all aware of this, but this is great for sharing music, videos, links, presentations. You have it, unlike in the traditional classroom. Remember when we have to roll in the big TV and work the VCR back in the day, or even just plug in your laptop? Now everyone has their screen right in front of them, up close and personal view. For our class, we created a playlist, and we asked everyone to share a song that reminded them of their sense of purpose. And I created a playlist on Apple Music. And then at every class, at the start or during breaks, I'd play the playlist. And students would get to hear like their song that they chose, or another song that they've never heard, but they really liked, or one that was funny. And that kind of became our little soundtrack for the semester. So even a class like statistics, I'm sure students could come up with some funny songs that include some mathematical concepts. It's just a chance to be creative and build that sense of community. And you can share that playlist with them, and they can add it to their device, and then they have it for eternity. Right, so that's music. You can share videos very easily, links. And again, you can pop that stuff in the chat as well. You can check in with them with a function to send messages to the group. So let's see. Do you want to explain that, Ben?
Yeah, just in terms of like the management of the groups and the time, because sometimes you can have people who are like, oh, we want to talk all about this one question and take up the entire time. So you can use the message function to send a little message like you should start talking about the second question and be ready to report back. Having the students have some type of product that they're supposed to bring back to the large group is helpful, because if you just ask people for like, what's everybody think, then not necessarily everybody's ready to share, but if they have something they have to share from that small group, then you get participation from everyone.
And remember, some people like to talk, some people like to write, some people they have different ways of contributing. So absolutely, and that can be through one of the Google products or something else you think of. I also just wanted to mention with the whiteboard, you can use a stylus on that. And so if you're writing out math problems on the board, you could write out the problems on your iPad with a stylus and it would show up on the whiteboard. So that's another great use for that. I'm not a math teacher, I'm sure you've all figured that out, but okay. A few more things we want to cover just to finish up on time. If you could pop to the next slide, Kim. As we mentioned, it's easier to put a face with a name, with a pronoun, with an email address, right? Like it's easier to do that. And someone else mentioned having a picture. So when you don't have your video up, at least a picture, it helps. Peter's nostalgic about the Chicago song. Is that what's going on here? That's my sense. Okay, next slide. Yep, reactions. Everyone want to give me a reaction? I know we practiced this one before. Put up a funny reaction to share some nonverbal feedback with each other about how we're feeling. When someone's talking, I love to use reactions because it's like, I'm listening, I'm with you. They can feel like they're getting that support and they're on the right track. Next page, slide actually. Obviously the convenience, right? No more long snowy commutes, driving home at 9:30 at night after a long day at work. We're safe from germs. We're in our pajamas. It's just easier. And to my next slide here is that it's more accessible. So for students with physical disabilities that parking and getting across campus to get to class, that can be challenging. This might allow you to take a vacation and teach your class from the beach, or go up to the cabin and teach your class, providing that you have good Wi-Fi. So we can all appreciate the benefits of that. Yep. Accessibility. As you can see now, we have the closed captioning on. It's not perfect, but it is helpful for students that have hearing difficulties. With students that are low vision, can enlarge the screen, can enlarge the text. We can record the session so that students that have ADHD and it's hard to take a lot of notes. I'm thinking of my daughter in her class. She can go back and re-listen to certain key parts. That's a lot easier for her than trying to take notes because she has dyslexia and ADHD. So that accessibility of having something to go back to and check. To that end, when you as an instructor can share your notes for students, that helps a lot of people who just to have that there takes the stress of trying to capture it, and they can focus on the key points that you've outlined. So I really appreciate that whenever people do share their notes and slides. I don't think of it as cheating or, hey, you didn't come to class, you have the notes. It just reinforces different learning styles. Okay. And this is, of course, the message is keep calm and carry on. Does anyone have the time? Just tell me what time it is.
It's 5 after.
It's 5 after. Okay, perfect. I have 10 more minutes. Keep calm and carry on. Something will go wrong. One time I somehow let half the class in and bumped the security button, and the rest of the class couldn't get into the Zoom, and we had to troubleshoot it And when I say we, I crowdsourced it to the class and said, hey, so-and-so can't get in, what's going on? They said they can't access it. And within a couple minutes, we were able to resolve that as a class. It's a chance for you to model vulnerability, model mistakes. You know, we don't have to be perfect. We just try to be the best that we can. And worst case scenario, you say, let's take a 5-minute bathroom break. And that gives you a second to think and troubleshoot the problem. So expect some difficulties, but don't stress about them is the goal. My question for you all, and we don't have a ton of time to talk about it, but is the genie out of the bottle? And what I mean by that is not, are we only going to do Zoom classes? Because I know a lot of us are itching to go back to in-person, and that's certainly the plan. But won't students and even instructors want the flexibility at certain times to be able to use Zoom when they're traveling for work and can't make it to the in-person class? Or when something, you know, there's a big snowstorm and we could either cancel class or we could quickly change it to a Zoom session. My sense is that students are going to want more flexibility. They're going to want that integration of a face-to-face class with some Zoom capabilities to have that flexibility. So that's sort of the uncharted water that we're going into, but it'll be interesting to see how we resolve that and how we evolve into offering the in-person piece with the accessibility and flexibility. Okay, next slide. I just wanted to leave you with a few tips, and maybe we'll have a few minutes to discuss, but a few tips that I found that worked for me. And I had a big slide of tips, and then Kim reminded me that visuals are so much better. So I made an acronym, and it's Beach Bum, okay? So the tips that I found, and you can let me know if these resonate with you, but would be breaks. So if you have a 4-hour class, a 3.5-hour class, it is okay to schedule 2 20-minute breaks in that class time so that people can take care of themselves. It also, by breaks, I mean break up your teaching style. So we don't want to just lecture, like lecture, then do a poll, then do a breakout room, then share some more information, then do a collaborative doc, to kind of break up that class for them so that it doesn't feel like one long, you know, monotonous class. We want to break it up. Embrace the new way of teaching and learning. Don't try to recreate your old class, that agenda play by play. Think of how the new ways of teaching and learning can enhance it, improve it, reorganize it, make it a little bit new and different while still getting across the concepts that you need to share. Actively use all your Zoom tools to get the most out of the platform. Play around with using all of the things we did today to see what works for you and works for your students. C is for community. And my tip is to urge you to build a community that makes a connection, not only between you and the students, that's super important, but also the students among themselves. This is their undergraduate experience right now. For some of them, this is their senior year. And to be able to leave feeling like I interacted with other humans is very powerful, and it meets like a basic need that we all have to have that connection. Use humor, try to be funny, make fun of yourself. If you have problems, be able to laugh it off, insert funny memes, share funny videos. Think of ways to use this technology to make class a little bit more fun and interesting. I trust you can be creative and think of ways to do that. Puns, yes. Peter, who I work with very closely, is the master of puns. And even though they're pretty cringeworthy, students start to get on board, and then they're waiting for the next pun, or before they know it, they're making up their own pun. See, don't get them started. So use humor. My second B is for breakout rooms to build relationships and promote engagement. Small groups require students to participate, right? Yeah, games, there you go. U is for understand. Understand that things may not go as planned for you and your students. Be flexible. And M is for messy. Dogs will bark, doorbells will ring, kids will photobomb. Just practice humility, stay cool, and just go with the flow. It's part of our technical life, okay? So does anybody have anything they want to add? Any tips I didn't cover? I mean, surely I didn't cover them all, so one of your own tips.
I was going to bring up, one of the things that I found useful, which I really didn't realize existed until my students showed it to me, was that we oftentimes in our class use drawings, and there is a way for audience members to mark up drawings or mark up documents that are on the.
That's the whiteboard feature that
No.
we couldn't show.
No, it's not the whiteboard feature. It's there's basically a markup tool within Zoom that allows me to take my stylus and circle what I'm talking about. If somebody has a drawing or a document or a chart or something up there, it allows me to actually circle what I'm referring to. It's quite useful. I don't see it on my options. Normally it's up there at the top where you have that green bar. It says view options. And usually down at that there, if I set up my Zooms, there's always that option there. I think it depends on how you set up the Zoom to begin with. But I'm just letting people know that is another tool that's can be very handy if you're using, graphics or things that you want people to point out, like show me where this is on this document,
Yep.
Really good to know, Peter. Thank you.
I just wanted to reinforce one of your points. And when we had to shift the first semester to go online, I was frustrated because I was trying to make it the in-class experience. And it wasn't until I realized that I had to change the course. And then that second full semester, we could get it as one thing. So that was really helpful too.
It's going to be different, but it might be better, right? This is a chance to do it differently, better, more creatively.
Yeah, I was going to comment if you've ever considered flipping the classroom or portions of the class, then this tool takes on a whole nother dimension because it's the mechanism by which you meet to do that sort of collaborative work, do the exercises together stuff. And I've found for those areas of the class that I've done that in, it's actually a better tool for that than it is to use to substitute lecturing in a room. So it kind of pushes for that even more.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is your interaction piece. You can record a lecture. They can read an article. It's how you process that. And this is the tool for doing that, whether it's in person or Zoom or whatever. Yeah. So Kim has a few resources she wants to share with us, but you can continue to share ideas in the chat. And then after she's done, we have a quick last poll.
So I'll go through these really quickly. These are Zoom tools. These are links to all the Zoom help and how to use all of these tools. And then Megan also found that the university has an open Zoom lab where you can go and get training from Zoom experts. So I think that's a really good thing. And then I just wanted to put in here again, how you get help from ATD is by using the ATD help form. And then we also put together this great ATD faculty resource website, which has tutorials and tips on remote teaching, groups, grading, course activities, media, and course editing. And there's also a link to the help form there. And here is a slide with all of our ATD staff contact information in case you need that, including our media team, the developers, and our project coordinator who also helps with textbooks. And then if you have any questions, of course, you're welcome to reach out to Megan or me. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yes, thank you all.
But before everyone goes, I'm posting in the chat the evaluation for this talk. So please take the time to fill that out and let us know what you think of it. That's all.
Okay. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have fun this semester.
Yeah.